Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of the Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a couple stories up now. Of course, you probably know about them right already because they traded for Cade York, the kicker, and the big news, they traded away Jahan Dotson. So those stories are up on ESPN.com. Give it a read. And finally, you know the other deal. If you want to become a member of the show, go to the Empire Media YouTube page, click on the word join, find the membership level you like, and go from there. Anyway, let's get to the news of the day because there are two pivotal stories for this franchise. I'm going to start with the minor news first because I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about Jahan Dotson. So trading for Cade York, it's a conditional 7th round pick. Typically that's tied to play time. I don't know the parameters of this one and how many games that he may have to be on the roster for them to surrender a 7th round pick to Cleveland. What I do know is he has a big, strong leg. I also know he was very inconsistent in Cleveland. I know that they have Dustin Hopkins. He wasn't going to beat out Dustin Hopkins. I think he was there just to make sure Hopkins was recovered from his injury last year. And so he was available. But again, big, strong leg, was somewhat inconsistent in camp from what I hear, and did make 2 field goals in the preseason games, including one for 55 yards. His first game as a pro, kicks a 58-yard winning kick against Carolina, and then was just struggled from thereafter. So, you know, if it hits, they have a guy with a good, strong leg that they can develop or can have for a long time. If he doesn't, you're going to be back to trying to find somebody else. And that's the situation they're in. It all goes back to Brandon McManus and the sexual assault lawsuit against him, that it would have been nice to know had they been told about this, because there's no way that his side didn't know all about this before he was signed. And that would have prevented this team from going down that road and maybe put themselves in a different spot going into training camp or into the offseason. So anyways, they got York, see where he goes. It's low risk here. If it pays off, great. If not, they're going to have to go back and find someone else. If somebody else becomes available next week in the final cuts that they like a lot better, well, then you can probably cut them and not lose anything. So anyways, there you go. Well, let's get to Jahan Dotson because that's the bigger deal. So they clearly were not, first of all, they're clearly not settled with the position. They've added a couple vets since the start of camp, Byron Pringle, Martavis Bryant, because I just don't think they feel like they certainly still need something there. So I don't know that this group is necessarily finished because they keep trying to find something that they don't have. And, you know, we'll see where they go from here. But with Dotson, he didn't fit into their plans. I think that's obvious. And I think he did not have a good camp. He didn't emerge. And it was a big tell last week. First of all, during training camp, he typically been one of the first 3 receivers. It was always like Terry, Jahan, and De'Ami Brown with Jahan in the slot. He did not stand out in camp. And I think going into last year, a lot of people, including myself, felt like he could have a really good year because there was a lot of things to build and a lot of things to like. But the more he played, I think the less effective he became. And the more defenses knew how to defend him and to stop him and take him away. That didn't help. So they do pick up a 3rd round pick in 2025. They get 2 7th round picks in 2025, but also giving up a 5th round pick in 2025. So they get a 3rd round pick at this point. They did not draft him. This is not on them. So they can move on and get this and get some more ammunition for next offseason, or for if they want to make another move now to bring in somebody else, they can do that as well, because now they have more picks to deal with. And that's what you want. And so that's what this group wants. If you're going to do these kind of moves, this is a good time to do it. This is the first year they can purge. It's not just because they're a draft pick from the previous regime. It's because it's a draft pick from a previous regime who has not done enough to stick around. And they also viewed him more as just a slot receiver. So knowing that, like, he wasn't going to be able to move around and do things. And I think he can be a good slot receiver, but they also have Zacchaeus who can do that. They have Jamison Crowder who can do that. They have Luke McCaffrey who can do that. So he became expendable because of all that. And, you know, it's funny because when they drafted him, traded back, of course, they pick him. And I remember talking to some coaches around the league that I know, and they were like, yeah, we like him. We wouldn't have picked him at 16. They'd have felt more comfortable picking him in the 20s. because they considered him just a slot receiver. Well, these guys were trying to see, could he do more? And the answer is no. And I talked about this, or I've talked about this a couple of times in the offseason or during training camp, the physical aspect of the position. I think that's something that worked against Jahan. He's not good against the physical play. And you saw that last year, and you saw where he was most effective was coming out of, whether it was in motion, whether it was in stack or bunch, where they couldn't get their hands on him and he could use his feet to win versus his hands. Well, if you want to win on the outside, if you can't win against press coverage, you're not going to win, period. So, and that was always going to be an issue for him. And I think we saw that. And it's funny because I asked somebody here last week how important blocking was in the whole scheme of things for the receivers, knowing that you want to run the ball, knowing that you want to do this. Well, the answer was, well, there's all these other things that are more important, but it's clear that the physical play was important because Cliff Kingsbury, when he talked to us today, mentioned that as well. Not just, just that how do you play without the ball? It's not like Jahan was lazy out there or anything like that, but the other ones can play more physical. Like Luke McCaffrey is a more physical receiver. Now, does he get open? Is he the same kind of route runner? Well, no, but he is physical. Zacchaeus has been physical for a guy, he's not a big guy, but he plays a lot more physical. And, I highlighted a block, or talked about a block he had in practice yesterday, and not just in practice, but you see it in the games too, where that plays out. And so I think like those kind of things, Jahan was a willing guy in that, but he wasn't, it just physics worked against him. And he's not a strong guy where he, to where he needs to be. He was willing to do it. It's just that it was harder in that way. And so that was going to add up. And if you're looking at the totality of what they want, well, that was a knock against him. It was going to be a knock against him. So then you look at special teams. Well, Zacchaeus and Crowder can help you on special teams. And McCaffrey showed that he could do that as well, not just as a returner, but maybe more so even in a different role on special teams. Dotson wasn't. He always worked at punt returns. He never returned a punt. So he wasn't going to help you. If he wasn't going to be a starting receiver, he was not going to help you. So, it's disappointing that another high pick did not work out here. There's a reason why this franchise hasn't worked out, because those high picks have not become who they needed him to be. Jamin Davis, I think, progressed at linebacker. Now is at defensive end. Emmanuel Forbes has, certainly struggled a lot last year. And he needs to show more that he's not going to that he's improved this year, right? So there's a line of these guys. Montez Sweat was a good pick. Dwayne Haskins was not. And so I think there's just a line that when you look at why this franchise hasn't excelled, it goes back to that. And that's why I think moving forward, they have to get those picks right. And I think there's a much better setup now to limit some of those mistakes and those errors. But and even in the Dotson one, they could have picked Olave at 11. He would have been a really good receiver. I know him very well from having watched him in college. Thought he would have been a really good pick, but I didn't mind trading back to get multiple players. And they, at one point you think, oh, they could have gotten the starting receiver in Dotson and the starting quarterback in Hall and starting back in Brian Robinson. Well, Brian Robinson is left, and he's a good player, but then it could also been you could have had Kyle Hamilton too. So you can always go back and look in the what ifs with every draft. Dotson didn't work here. And so now they're moving on. And like I said, for Kingsbury talked about the all around play for receivers. And I just don't think that he had that. And again, I think because he didn't separate from the other receivers, that it wasn't a necessity to keep him, and they got something for him. That's what you want to do. I do think he can run routes from the slot. I think with the talent around in Philly, I think he can do well, but you always have to worry. Like we've seen it from this other end. When a team trades in the division, there's a reason why they're giving up on a guy. And we saw it with Donovan McNabb for sure. And now the Eagles are going to see it too. Now it's just a matter of, do they have a better situation for a guy like him because of the talent around him, because of the, it's not just, you have a quarterback who's been pretty good. You have two really good receivers in A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and you have a top tight end in Dallas Goedert. There's stuff around Dotson where you can maybe just work him in the slot and let him go. So, we'll see. But again, you don't typically trade in the division if you're scared of seeing that guy. And so, there you go. De'Ami Brown, I think when you look at the guys on the outside, you look at Terry, De'Ami Brown, and I think Byron Pringle you're going to put out there right now. So if I had to keep six right now, if I had to guess who the six are, it'd be McLaurin, De'Ami, Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, Crowder, and Pringle, and the last three can all work on special teams. Now, I think then I think like does something else happen between now and final cuts or after final cuts even that maybe brings another guy in here to work at that spot. And you can always put Bryant on the practice squad. Nobody's going to claim him. He just hasn't shown anything for that to happen. And if you don't see much difference between them, you may as well get multiple picks and help continue to build for the future, giving you more ammunition, whether again to make a trade or whatever it is, to move up in the draft, whatever, just add more bodies. And they need good young, they need to redevelop a good young roster. When you look at people who talk about like the top rosters or the top guys under 25 years old in this league, you're not looking at anybody here. So, Jaden Daniels could be on that list eventually, but right now, of the guys who have played, they're not going to put anybody on that list. So anyways, there we go. And then the last thing is, what does this mean? I know people bring up Brandon Ayuk. Does this mean, well, there's a couple things there. Getting another third round pick isn't necessarily going to make or break this deal if they wanted to go after him. They know the cost, not just in terms of trade, but money, right? And I think that's as big a holdup as anything. Adam Peters came from San Francisco. San Francisco is having a difficult time getting to the point where they're willing to pay Ayuk what he wants or what he feels he deserves. I think Peters is probably aligned in that thought process. But the other part is too, it still goes back to this. If you're going to trade for Ayuk, you've got to give up something that's going to hurt you. It's not just draft picks here. Like, that's great. You got another third round pick. I don't think that's the make or break situation here. You'd have to give up, most likely, if you're San Francisco, who do you want? Terry McLaurin. So so it really comes down to, it's not about the picks, it's about who would you be willing to give up and then pay him. And if you try, I don't think you're going to get two receivers you're making around, 25 to $30 million and do it like that. So anyway, so I don't view it as a precursor to something like that. And if something happens, then clearly I'd be wrong. Again, another failed first round pick. There's a reason why this franchise hasn't excelled. For the entire month of August, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is offering multiple ways to save on climbing and zip lining and 50% off axe throwing. There are only a few Sundays left without football, so it's time to get that last summer adventure on the schedule. There's no better place to spend the last few days and nights of the summer with friends and family. Don't just take our word for it. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring was named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. For the rest of the summer, you can get the best climbing, zip lining, and axe throwing in the country, up to 50% off right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/kind. Would there be more trades from here? And it's always possible. Like when you go into a new place, we've talked about this before, but they're not beholden to any of these guys. They're bringing their own guys in. So if you're not sold on Federian Mathis, look to trade him. Because could you do that? Like both he and John Ridgway, I think, would have some interest around the league for the body sizes, the body types they are, and maybe in a different defensive system that may be more prized than maybe it might be here. Don't know if that's going to happen, but I would not be, but if they end up doing that, would you be shocked? No. Then you look at a guy like, what about Emmanuel Forbes, another former first round guy? I don't know that another team's going to give up a whole lot for him either. And you just don't have a lot of corner depth. So, but the other part of that is, then what? And I know like Mike Samerstill has been working on the outside. We've talked a little bit about that. He's been working inside, outside. He does not fit the profile of what Quinn typically plays on the outside. Typically, they're going to be 6'1", 6'2" guys and can be physical. The difference with Samerstill, where they feel like he has a shot to at least help out there, is he's very smart, understands route concepts, sponge for information, and a big-time film studier. All that stuff helps. He also will compete his butt off, and I think that also matters too. You want someone out there who's going to compete. First and foremost, you want someone who competes. And I think that gives him a favor, but we still don't know what it's going to look like for him when he's going up against the top receivers. So I think that makes it tough. And so I could see them keeping Forbes around. And they've also talked about like they like his willingness to tackle, et cetera. And I think, I think that's, I don't know that I see there, but I wouldn't be shocked if they have another trade or two, just because again, they have some guys from the past who maybe have a little bit of trade value for some lower round picks and just start recouping some of those. So, or building up more capital that way. All right, well, let's get to what happened in practice today, because I think that's all we need to discuss there. And first of all, Marcus Mariota is still out. So predominantly it was Jaden Daniels and Jeff Driscoll, and Sam Hartman's still out. So Trace McSorley got about 5 minutes they went 14 periods today, and then the 15th was Trace McSorley getting some run for about 5 minutes of getting some reps, because he's going to play a lot in Sunday's game against New England. Kaz Allen still working a lot with the running backs. It was interesting because Kingsbury was asked about him after practice, and he said I'm not comparing him to Deebo Samuels, but they see him in that kind of a role, a guy who can help you and a running back, a guy who can play in the slot. He considers him an explosive guy. And to be honest, they have a lack of guys like him. So is he a lock? No. But I do think he's going, just like last year, going to the last game, he's a big time player to watch. And the fact that he fumbled the ball last week, running the ball, and then he's back out there again this week with the same groupings, to me says a lot. And he's also working a lot as a kick returner. And I think that, Dan Quinn brought him up there earlier this year. So I definitely think he's got a shot to make this roster, to play a very specific role. And, the hard part on that fumble was he did cover the ball with two hands. It's not like he was reckless with it, but he's got to get better there, because that was a knock on him last year as well. I did watch him return some kicks. They're working on some ground ball kickoffs today. Did a nice, he fielded cleanly, and he made one really good decision on it to let one go, get in the end zone, go touch it, touch it down and get a touchback out of that. So felt like, but he fielded the ball well. So, but he's a guy to watch. I don't know if he makes it at this point, but he's absolutely a player to watch. And you probably know that by now, but I think it's probably even more than last year, because these guys really like that explosiveness. He is better than last year. He's been more consistent than last year. They just don't have a lot of guys who can do some of what he can do. So the other thing you always notice in practice is how loud Daryl Tapp is, the defensive line coach. And it's funny because sometimes you hear like all this noise and you think it's all these players, and it's really a lot of times just Tapp. But you do hear, having said that, you hear a lot of chatter from the entire group when they're getting ready to go in the 11-11. There's a lot of energy that pours out of that from the group, but so much of it stems from Tapp. And he's out there yelling to man the F up, all that good. And he's yelling out violence. So, and he's not the only one yelling that. So just think it's interesting, but that's, you want energy. He's got energy. First play in 11-11, nice little in the red zone, nice little throw from Daniels to Luke McCaffrey, who was the first guy in the slot today. So nice little out route by McCaffrey, nice throw, touchdown. Next play, like KJ Henry a lot. I'm working with the defensive end with that first group. The coaches love what they saw from him too. Just really got a feel, good physical run stop against the tackle, and a nice job by Henry. I think he's done a nice job in his progression. And, I had him on the roster before camp. I'm not taking him off now. I haven't seen any reason why he wouldn't be on. You never know, but he's a guy, like, I know the past draft picks get criticized. He's coming along nicely. I don't know that he's going to ever be a starter, but as a rotational guy, a guy who can help off the bench, I think he's progressing to that role. And by the way, at one time, Tapp also yelled to his guys, get the F out of your stance. Now, of course, he doesn't say F. He adds a few more letters to that F. You had Jamin Davis. I know they talk about him improving at defensive end. He was working. You see him working more against some of the starters now, because you had to kind of get him comfortable working as an end against the backups to then progress to working against the starters, and that's what we're seeing him do now. Had a couple of nice plays, but I did see one rush where Cornelius Lucas was able to just get him to the outside. I think that's where I think it's going to be hard for him to learn just the hand fighting that needs to go on, and just the angles you need to attack at, because when the tackle is able to just kind of be patient with him, I think they can right now ride him out. So he's going to have to progress in that area, but you've already seen some progression from the start of camp in some of the pass rush, whether it's, the little crossover that he used the other day, hadn't seen that before. So he's working on some things, but there's still a ways to go. But I do think they like how he's playing and setting the edge, if nothing else. So, and how he's progressed there. Like the little swing pass from this little play where Eckler coming around the right side. The timing on the play is what I like. So we can't really go into great detail about what you see on a play, but suffice to say that it was a swing pass to the right to Eckler. Nobody's over there, but it happens because Daniels gets through things quick and makes it, gets to quick read and quick decision. And, I think the eyes get fooled on that play, but I like that timing. The timing is what has really stood out to me throughout the summer because it gives guys a chance to run after the catch.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, the John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to the Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts, and many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
Driscoll. I'm going to get back to Daniels in a minute because I'm kind of going back and forth. But Driscoll had an excellent seam ball to Mitchell Tinsley. Tinsley dropped it. And that's the second time he's dropped one in that red zone area, in the end zone in this camp. And that's really hard for a guy trying to make the roster. For him to do that, it makes it tougher. I don't know that he was going to make it if he makes those catches, but it certainly makes it tougher. One thing to file away, McCaffrey is a former quarterback. So don't forget that when you're watching what this team does during the regular season. And it's funny because one of the other things with that is there's all this talk about like Kingsbury showing all this stuff in the preseason. He's not showing a lot, folks. Like it becomes a silly storyline like that he's showing a lot. It's just because there's some similarities. We know he wants to run no huddle. So you're going to run the up-tempo offense. You've got to get your quarterback ready for that. You've got to get your players ready for that. We know from the stats that there's not a lot of motion, but where he uses McLaurin with the packages and all that, it's going to look different once the season begins, because what we don't know too is the influence of Anthony Lynn and the influence of Brian Johnson, even Bobby Johnson. So they all Bobby Johnson was part of a successful run game a couple years ago in New York. He was also in Buffalo. You also had Brian Johnson was part of a successful offense with the Eagles. You had Anthony Lynn, knows offense really well, knows the run game very well. So those are going to be some influences on Kingsbury that we just don't know how that plays out yet. But do not get caught up in what he has shown in the preseason compared to what he has shown during the regular season. There's a style of offense, yes, in terms of motion, et cetera, but the packages they're using, the formations and all that, there are things that we're seeing in practice that we have not seen in games. Trust me on that. And I will also add that in 2012, when Griffin was here, there was a lot we didn't see, even though we could watch them up until through the second preseason game, I think it was. And after that point, they're putting in stuff. And then that New Orleans game looked dramatically different from what we saw them, what they were working on in practice during training camp. So they're putting stuff in. It's just that when you start putting it all together, when we're not there, then even when we are, because we can't report all these formations, all that. So you are seeing things, but don't start to worry about what Kingsbury has shown. If he's showing too much, he's not showing a lot of what they're going to do. Back to 11 on 11s. Jeremy Chin fills a hole on one run by Robinson. Praise for that. See Nick Allegretti pulling on another play, taking out Benjamin St. Juste with a little bit of a nasty attitude on that block. Kind of like that. Nice slant ball to Terry McLaurin from Jaden Daniels for a touchdown. Again, boom, boom. Timing, good throw. He's open, touchdown, boom. I think the one thing I think they could use at receiver is still getting more size at there to get some of they like to throw those fades to the corner. You can get those slot fades to the corner. Sometimes that's just a matter of more so quickness than speed, and then a quarterback who can drop it in there in the bucket, and that's where Daniels comes in. But it would be nice to have a guy with a little bit more size able to do it. That's where McCaffrey can help them because he is a little bit bigger of a slot guy when he plays inside there, so he can maybe help him there. But he can also be a little bit more physical with it. But he's got to get open to get to that point as well. At least create enough separation where that play is even available to him. And it's funny because I was watching him today one time against Samerstill. Samerstill was very physical with him, and he completely took him out of the play. And that speaks a lot about Samerstill as much as it says anything about McCaffrey. But he was physical, and Jaden Daniels had to go to the other side of the field. But it's because Samerstill takes him out of play, gets him at the line, comes into the end zone, tries to cut, nothing there, face guards him, not there. Good job by him. The other thing I like too is Jeremy Reeves had a nice day at a couple of good pass breakups, one to Zach Ertz, and the ball was behind, one throw from Daniels, ball behind her, it's just a little bit. Reeves comes up from the safety position, jars the ball loose. Then another time he defends John Bates at the goal line, just a really nice play. So 2 good plays by Reeves. Missed a couple tackles the other night. I don't know that he's in jeopardy because, as you heard me say yesterday, Dan Quinn considers him a first-level special teams player. That should keep him safe, even though safety is a spot where it's like they got a lot there. The other thing, after the breakup to Zach Ertz, I like the next play is a touchdown pass to Terry McLaurin coming from the left side, cuts open to the middle of the field. What did not appear to be the first read, and Daniels was kind of drifting back in the pocket, sees him, boom, balls out. As soon as he saw him, balls out. And that's where, we get into arm talent. That's what arm talent is. See it, go. It's not a see it, then go. It's see it, go. And that's what he does here. Open. Derek Force was in coverage area. I don't know. When you're watching these plays, you're watching a specific area first. I can't watch the whole. If you watch everybody, you don't really see anything. So I wasn't watching McLaurin directly on the play, so I don't know who was on him at the snap. It looked, maybe it was zone coverage. I don't know. But I know he got open. I know the quarterback saw him, and I know he delivered a nice ball. Frankie Louvu with 2 picks today. One was just, I don't know what happened on the play, off target. Louvu's there, picks off Driscoll. No receiver was right there with him, so I think there was some sort of miscommunication. Another one from Driscoll. Louvu in the middle of the field, tips it, picks it off. Nice play. Guy's going to help. Javante Jean-Baptiste was working with the ones today, got praised big time for his physical play in the run game. And I think you see that. Like, I went into camp not thinking he would make the roster, that he'd be a practice squad guy. Now, I'm looking at him as a 50 guy in the 53 because he has shown qualities. He's got that length for pass rusher, and the physical play there was a good thing for them to see. By the way, Daniels also had a nice pass he had a couple more passes. I told you yesterday, there's a developing chemistry with Zach Ertz. It's been there all summer. I shouldn't say developing. It's been there all summer, but he had 2 more to him today. One over the middle, really good throw. And then another one later where one of the last plays that we saw was just a deep ball. I'm not even sure how deep. I was in the end zone, so it's looked like 40 yards or so. Ertz somehow breaks open to the corner, and nobody's there with him, just lofted ball in stride, end zone. And for the second time in the day, Ertz spiked the ball after the play. And here's the best part. Sam Cosmi does a cartwheel he runs down to the end zone, does a cartwheel before he leaves the end zone. So God bless Sam Cosmi. But that's what he did. So, and you know what? They're feeling pretty good, so why not? And then a couple more. Nick Allegretti took some snaps at center with Michael Dieter at left guard. They do this sometimes as an emergency situation. So what happens in a game if? Well, this is what happens. Allegretti goes to center. Dieter comes in at guard. They wanted to see how that looked. One of the first snaps, though, to Daniels, it was a fumbled snap. So, but he did that. They worked that combination for a few reps. I also like to play from Noah Benegany. He came up against a run one time, really just from the slot on the right, comes up hard, would have gotten Austin Eckler for a loss on the play. I think he's had a nice solid camp for them. So I think they're in good spot with him if they had to go to him as a slot corner, if they want to keep Sandwich still outside, I think they're okay. That's about it, folks. That's a long report, a lot to talk about. So I appreciate you tuning in. As always, And I'll be back on Friday with another practice report. So I'll talk to you next time.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.